how on earth would you have learned to become a pastor if you didn't have to sit with people in the most difficult moments of their life in your early years as a priest?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's what shapes the journey, right? Is the personal connection with people and the lack of words, right? Recognizing that there's nothing but presence. And, AI cannot offer presence. It can only offer words.
Oh,
and so much. Well, that's true.
That's
right?
Brilliant.
And so often, all what you need is just somebody to be with you, not to tell you things.
Welcome to Magnified Ministry Podcast, the podcast dedicated to inspiring, encouraging, and equipping parish leaders to build thriving missionary communities in today's rapidly changing world. This is the Magnified Ministry Podcast. Welcome back to the Magnified Ministry Podcast. What a summer it was. What a start of fall it has been. Man, I'm excited to be talking about this topic in this series, Father Peter, because we get to dive into, I would say, the topic du jour, as they say in French, AI. But we're not going to be talking about AI in terms of the headlines and technology. We want to talk about what we are hearing, what we are learning, what we are observing from our young people around us about their perspectives on AI, their perspectives on how AI is impacting their daily life, but most importantly, how AI is impacting their faith, their relationship to God, and what it means for us as a church. Would you like to give a little bit of context on where this particular series and this topic came about?
Well, I think when you think about Pope Leo being elected as Supreme Pontiff, and early on in his pontificate, he spoke about AI. I think a lot of people were like, why is the Pope talking about AI? Nobody's even using it quite much around the world, or we are just testing it. And I think there was such a Holy Spirit driven movement, because now obviously that changed big time over the year, and that just shows you, just think about yourself, right, as you are watching it or listening to it, like how much more AI most of us use versus a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. And that just tells you that something is happening. So thank God for Pope Leo being early on and kind of naming it and publishing the encyclical on it that we'll talk about a bit. But as we kind of dive into this whole idea of, how do we interact with technology and AI, and what influence that has on our world, on the church, on our relationships, we thought, well, rather than to just look at the studies that are up there, and there's a fair amount of very good insights and studies all over the place, our question was, can we do some of our own study here at St. Clement's, since we have so many young adults, and really dive into the conversation with those young people and really understand what is it that they are saying about AI, but also how do they use technology and what's the opportunity for the church. Now, that's a big thing for us, because, if you're running a church and most of your people or vast, group in your congregation are young adults, or if it's young families, or if it's people in their 70s, you as a church have to step back so often, right, as we did, and kind of say, well, let's consider listening first. What is it that our people need? What is it that is on their mind? And then our programming is meant to really kind of encourage them and help them to start from where they are, not from where they wish they would be. And so that's what we do with Gen Zs. We kind of serve roughly about 140 some people, and then we had nearly 80 conversations with people, young adult Gen Zs, specifically around the use of technology, the place of God, spirituality, the place of the church. And what that does is, it informs our programming for the next 18 months probably, but also it helps us to help you to know how young adults think.
Yeah. And I think what we're planning on talking about over the next 4 episodes is this arc of what young adults are teaching the church about being human. Mm-hmm. Right? And you may be thinking, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Why on earth are we talking about being human? I would argue that AI is no different than social media, no different than the internet, no different than whatever technology innovation has come before us. It's just something that has been adopted and become mainstream much faster than any of those things. But at the end of the day, it's just another distraction, potential for distraction, just like it is a potential for improvement, right? And so at the end of the day, the big question is still, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to glorify God in this day and age, right? And so,
and also, I think another element of it is, does AI make us better people, or does AI make us lazier people?
yeah,
Right, and there's some element of it, especially as people are using it more and more for
Right.
work and so forth. The question is, doesn't help you to be the best person you could be, or doesn't justify you being a lazy person and just having AI do it? And you hear all those stories all over the place, right? When people
Absolutely.
don't review things, even including the prayers. I mean, there's all those things that people, create prayers, they never read it, and they kind of read the script, and it says, well, this is a prayer that will fit just fine for this gathering if you
That's
do
right.
this and that. And people
That's
are
right.
like, okay, well,
That's
at
where-
least you could
you know
do is
what?
to review AI created prayer.
I want everyone to hear, we are coming up with a new term on Magnified Ministries, prayer slap. There's work slap.
Oh yeah.
There's no such thing as prayer slap.
like that.
All you parish ministers out there, all you parish leaders, avoid prayer slap.
That's right. Let the Holy Spirit lead your prayer.
Yeah, that's good.
Let the Holy Spirit
Let the Holy
move you.
Spirit move you to prayer as opposed to the machine or the whatever is behind the machine. Anyway, 4 lessons
Yes.
on AI, social media, faith, the parish's mission, and we're gonna try to weave in some of the things that we have learned of this technology. Both you and I are avid users of the technology. We're proponents of the technology, but we're proponents of responsible use. And so we're gonna talk about how are we a machine as humans, right? Are we more than a machine or less than a machine? We're going to talk about this idea of connection, right? How a parish can be a place of connection within this digital world. This idea of attention, right? I think we're seeing a significant decline in our ability as humans to hold attention, and AI is going to make it even worse. And then lastly, what about conscience, right? And why is that such a special thing, and how do we weave that into our day-to-day life, right? But today, we're going to talk about this idea of what does it mean to be distinctively human, and how can our parishes help their people articulate that, understand it, and claim it. Where should we start?
Well,
Is that some theological framing for us before we dive into the waters?
Well, I think it's so easy for us, right? Because we actually do believe in God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? One God, 3 persons. And so we believe in this perfect communion of the Trinity, right?
Some people would, I'm thinking of the AI people, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and Claude. But
Yeah, that's right. That's not it.
It's not it.
Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit stay with there. And there's this perfect union, right? Communion of the Father. So the Father is the beloved, the Son is the beloved, and then the Holy Spirit is what unites them. So you have a lover, beloved, and love that unites them. And so this movement, right, of love is what pours out of God's heart into our hearts, into creation, right? So the creation then becomes a reflection of who God is. So it's relational right away, right?
Yeah.
That's why, throughout the centuries, the church raises the question about care of, creation and the planet and co-responsibility, because it's all part of this movement of God's creation. We are relational. Everything is in the relationship of each other. So for us, it's an easy framing, right? Because if God is relational and we are created in the image and likeness of God, therefore you and I are relational. So we grow through relationships. Sometimes people kind of argue that one and they say, well, I don't need relationships. And I said, okay, well, let's say the most important thing happened in your life, the thing you always wanted for it to happen. And so do you just lock yourself in the room and celebrate by yourself? No, you right away tell the people that care for you, or you care, right? You cannot wait to share the joy of it, because that tells you right away how relational we are, that actually in that sharing, in that human interaction, you actually renew your own humanity, right? You fully appreciate your humanity. I mean, a number of weeks ago, right, we were in Michigan, and just watching you with your girls, right, running with the, they didn't see you for about 10 seconds, and they turn around like they didn't see you for years, right? They are running, daddy, excited. Just right, it gives you the insight of how important the human interaction is to us.
Right.
And so I think that's our framing. The framing is a human interaction is a starting point because it's relational, because we need relationships. And so the AI, as helpful as it could be and is in so many areas, what you have to be careful is that doesn't rob you from your natural longing, a human longing for relationship with other human person.
Right. And I think that I think is the core wedge, if you will, of what we're trying to talk about in this episode, which is, are humans a mere machine or more than a machine, or not really a machine at all? Because in some ways, right, like there's different, things and ways of talking. And if you really study even the last 2 years, right, of the advent of AI into the mainstream. And mind you, artificial intelligence has been around for a long time, right? It's not a new concept. It's not something new, but it's become mainstream in the last, 6 months, really, but really in the last 2 years since ChatGPT came out. The first headlines were all about, hey, these models are going to replace people, right? We're going to be able to automate so much work that there's going to be this incredible work apocalypse, right? And everyone's going to be replaced. That's not really what people are talking about anymore. And regardless of whether or not it's in the news, I think we have to remember that all of these tools, right, have been created, I think, out of human ingenuity and creativity, right? We have to remember these are nothing more than statistical models, right, that are trying to predict what they should say to you. There's no thing that hasn't been coded by humans, even though they're starting to create their own things, right? But in that, there's this risk, right, to think that these machines have greater intelligence than us. And in some ways they do, right? Because what AI has done is accelerated the access to intelligence. The internet gave us access to information, unlimited information. But these tools, these chats, intelligence, right? And the thing about them is they are smarter than you. Not only that, they will make you feel really good about whatever you ask. Yeah. They're psychopath, right? No matter what you say, they will tell you, yo, wow, oh my goodness, earth-shattering question.
Yeah.
What should I have for breakfast? Oh my goodness, it's so good that you're asking. That's so good that you're paying attention. But all of that is designed to do what? To hack your brain.
Yeah.
Just like the algorithms of social media were designed to keep you on the platform. I think we have to remember that.
Yeah.
They just love making you feel good. Not because these machines care about your flourishing. They care about keeping you engaged.
Because that's where the money is.
Because the more you prompt, the more you use, the greater the token usage, the more you burn. And it's a cycle, right? The more you use, the more dependent. The more dependent, the more you use. And it can become not a symbiotic relationship, but a bit of a dependent relationship. And so in some ways, whether you recognize it or not, you are developing a relationship with the tool. And I think that's a little bit of what you're pointing to is people today, right? Something like 30 or 40% of people will use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude to ask questions about life or faith or spirituality or any sort of therapy, right?
But you know what was interesting? So in the conversations, more so than the survey itself, what really struck me as I was reading through all those reviews, and by the way, we'll publish that for you so you can look through it, through the findings of it. But as I was reading through the scripts, what was very interesting is that the young adults themselves were annoyed that when they go for advice to other young adults, their friends, they tell them, oh, just AI it. And so they think there's this shift of responsibility for being a good friend or being really somebody whose insight can inform your perspectives as well. How you just AI it, right?
Well, because but that makes perfect sense. I mean, we have been primed to be completely taken advantage in this current moment as humans, if you think about it. Because think about what, and we are old enough to remember a world where there was no Google.
Yeah.
Right? Remember there was like Yahoo and Ask Jeeves?
Yeah.
And those were terrible search engines. And then Google
remember when there wasn't even one.
There wasn't even one, right? You had to ask a friend. You had their newspaper, right?
I remember. I thought actually, Marco, who would ever go to that big screen and read the news on it if you can do it in a paper? I thought that was the most ridiculous concept on the planet. Clearly, I'm not an early adopter nor innovator.
You are now, though, in some
Yeah,
ways.
but
You are.
I'm about
You
40
are.
years behind.
Yeah, but
on that one.
But like, think about.
I still remember sitting in my technology class thinking, why would you do this? That's so ridiculous.
This makes no
to
sense.
spend time in the front of like a, I mean,
Well,
as a
I
small
think-
boy, I remember like seeing those giant computers. I'm like, why would you waste your time looking at this screen, reading the news if you can like sit outside and read the newspaper?
But think about the change that we have seen in our lifetime in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
No generation in history has seen technological advancement at the rate of speed that we have in the last 20 years.
Wow.
Internet, well, color television, whatever, but
Yeah.
like internet, iPhone,
Yeah.
the cloud,
Yeah.
right? The interconnectedness, globalization, right? Like a world that is hyperconnected, social media, right? At this point, remember we were talking about this and all the studies that Barna has done, social media was breaking apart the fabric of human connection, right?
Yeah.
And even before we started talking about AI, we were talking about how the younger generations are starting to try to pull away from social media because of the deterrent that it's having.
Mm-hmm.
Now this technology has been inserted that literally can do anything. It can give you an answer to the world's hardest questions in a minute. It takes away your need to think critically if you just press a button.
Yeah.
It takes away your ability to create because it will actually create for you, right? And so now we've released the most powerful technological advancement in human, not I want to say in human history, but one of in human history to the masses without any sort of warning label. Hey, use of this thing may take away your humanity, or use of this thing may take away your ability to make connections with people, or hey, use of this thing will have a significant impact on your ability to think critically, to communicate effectively, and to create naturally, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Pope Leo somehow had this inspiration,
Yeah.
right? To not only take up the name of Leo, right? Because it harkens back to Leo XIII with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, Rerum Novarum, the Catholic social teaching. If
Right.
you've never read it, do read it.
To now him saying, I'm Leo XIV, and the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is this new, I don't think he used the word threat, because it's not a threat. It's this new thing that's happening in our current moment that we need to be very aware and in tune of and have a place at the table in helping not people adopt the tool. I don't think that's what the church is trying to say is we're helping you take your humanity back and be in charge of technology.
Exactly. And try to recognize the tool as the tool that
Exactly.
has, as you said, this incredible level of intelligence, right? That is there. And at the same time, what, in Magnificat Humanitas, in his encyclical, Leo says that AI imitates the functions of intelligence, but clearly has no body, no lived experience, no conscious, no inner growth through love, mistakes, forgiveness, fidelity. I love that, right? Because that's what makes us human, right? Is you having the experiences of the past, you understanding the insight of your relationships. And that's what makes, you a friend to somebody else, right? That it's that lived experience, is that connection that really cannot be replicated. And I think what the Pope is saying is we have to be very careful not to lose that, right? How do we protect that? And it's interesting because in our studies...
Yeah, what did you hear from the
that's
young
what,
adults?
that one of
on
the
that?
biggest surprise people ask me all the time now, what are your biggest takeaways? And the biggest one, which again, maybe it just illustrates how ignorant I am about the whole thing. But again, I've been on sabbatical, so don't judge me. So I've been a little bit disconnected through the whole thing. But what I was the most surprised by is that it is the technology people, it's the young adults who work with AI who are the most weary about AI.
Yeah, for sure.
And both on ethical side of usage and like human sides of usage. So you say, well, for sure. So explain why, because like that was a big, like I don't know why I didn't think about it. Because like if you were an app developer and your app is doing well, you'll be the first one to be a cheerleader, right? If you are, a healthcare professional and you just came up with a new healthcare plan, you the first cheerleader. But those young folks, they are in this industry and they're like, whew, there's a lot here. Let's stop and let's really reconsider. I think that's a new kind of a behavior.
I think it probably is. I think that there's a couple of things going on, right? From some of the work that I'm doing and conversations that I'm having with, executives and leaders all over the place from my work. I think there's a lot of different forces at play, right? I think the first one is, put yourself in a company that, our young people would be at, right? Most likely there's been a lot of noise about AI from the top, right? And something like 80 or 90% of companies across the United States are deploying AI and using AI, right?
Wow.
Like pretty much every company in America has done something with AI, right? Because all the senior leaders felt like they needed to, right? You got pressure from the board. This is all over the news. It's basically like this magic technology that's going to solve all of your problems. And you just need to deploy it. Like you don't want to be the company that falls behind. And so there's all of these fears that have led senior leaders to just deploy the tools and feel like they must get it out in the wild.
Yeah.
But what happens next is the fallacy, I think, in what we saw a lot of, which is, true transformational change, which is there's a difference between saying we think this is really important and you should do it and actually helping people walk through that journey. And so did you know that only 5% of companies that have deployed AI are getting any real financial value from it? Wow. From 90% of companies using, and BCG, McKinsey, a bunch of, well-respected organizations have analyzed this from different angles. 90% are using it, only 5% are getting value. What that tells you is that most organizations have just thrown it out.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to be behind.
Nobody wants to be behind. And you can say, I'm doing it. Look, we have all of these licenses. Look, we have all of these people using it. But the problem is, imagine if when you became the pastor of St. Clement, you had come in here and said, everyone should evangelize. And there was this like magic thing or like this thing that you could just give people, right? And you were like, now you're an evangelizer, right? Like
a little sticker,
right?
Sticker
a little,
you're
like, what if it was a little sticker? Like, now you're an evangelizer. Now you're an evangelizer. And maybe you even gave them some training and you gave them the words and they knew how to like, hey, tell me about your life with Jesus. But there was nothing else.
Yeah.
Do you think that would actually take root? Do you think you would actually be where you are as an organization, right? Yeah. No. Because what we're facing right now is a tremendous change in how people need to think about how they think, work, and do. And very few people are taking the time to step back and really methodically assess how do we transform everything that we know about our organization so that we can augment people with purpose, not replace them. And so that's the context that I think many of our young people are finding themselves in. And so if you are a 20-some-year-old person that just graduated from college, that in your college campus, everyone around you was using AI to do the homework. Now, since now you're doing that, your school has now developed bots to identify what homework is done by a robot. Well, when that happens, there's other tools now that can make your AI slop sound more human. Well, guess what? Now universities can have robots to detect a robot that has made something more human. So now you're coming out of that environment where no one's doing any work, really. No one's doing any critical thinking. Everyone's just trying to be lazy and find the easy way out because everyone wants the life, but they don't want the lifestyle. Everyone wants to feel like they've accomplished something, done something without the hard work that comes with it. And so landing in a context like that, coming from an environment like that, imagine being a 21-year-old starting your first job.
Sure. Yeah.
And you're looking around and saying, I'm being told to use this tool because if I don't, I'm going to be out of a job in 10 years. Okay, fine. I can figure that out. But then you start using the tool in the way that people are telling you, and you start creating more than you ever have. I mean, you've done it, I've done it. It's called AI slop. That's why we said the prayer slop thing. But creating stuff on this doesn't mean it's actually any good. Like, you've probably used it to write, a thing here or there. What do you think about it when it writes it for you? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Maybe somewhere in between. But many young people look at it and say, dang, that's really good. I would have never been able to think about that. Oh, and by the way, the tool told me how smart I am.
Yeah, that's right.
And how good I am.
Yeah.
And so you then pass that to your manager, and your manager has all that. And so you're just basically
they only
becoming...
can do so much.
Exactly. So now you basically feel like this big part of you as a young adult is being ripped away
you're right.
because it's being replaced by this in some ways, and you're not really being taught. You're not being not disciple, but you're not being apprenticed by managers in how to think critically, because it's the easy way out.
And you don't have the lived experience.
And you don't have the lived experience. So how on earth would you have learned to become a pastor if you didn't have to sit with people in the most difficult moments of their life in your early years as a priest?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's what shapes the journey, right? Is the personal connection with people and the lack of words, right? Recognizing that there's nothing but presence. And, AI cannot offer presence. It can only offer words.
Oh,
so much. Well, that's true,
that's
right?
Brilliant.
And so often, all what you need is just somebody to be with you, not to tell you things. This is really great. Marco, it seems like maybe you are slightly passionate about it. But we'll talk. We have to wrap up this episode, but the next one will be titled Connected But Not Known, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we've learned through our conversation with Gen Z around it. But I think if you are a church leader or a person listening to our podcast, this series on technology and young people and freedom and all that stuff, how would you summarize this episode for people? Why did we record it, Marco?
I think we recorded it because it's a great manifestation of what the church fathers in Vatican II said about what the church should be. You remember that quote that guided a lot of the work we did at the Arch, that the church is ever the same and ever changing,
and has a responsibility to read
to read the signs of the times.
Yeah.
And so that was what we founded all of the work that we did on, this idea of the change from Christendom to post-Christian and pre-Christian. We did the same thing in COVID.
Yeah.
We recognized the signs of the times and how people needed to be reached in that particular moment. Yeah. This is no different. This is us as a church living out our missional call.
Yeah.
And so I think if I were to summarize this is what it looks like to be a church on mission, to be aware to what's actually happening around us, to recognize how the world is impacting
so we can
our
accompany people.
So we can accompany people. Because guess what? It's AI this year. It's going to be something else in 2-3 years, right? Yeah. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, that's right. We don't know. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for our week 1.
See you next time.